Hello, Boxer. How? Let me actually do a proper intro, okay?
Okay.
He just laughed on me. Hello, welcome back to the ASAP Weekly Age of Empires podcast. I am your host Lazero, and I'm joined by Boxer Saint. How's it going, Boxer Saint?
Good. Just swinging away. You
So
like that? You told me to come up with like an intro phrase. Does that work?
just swinging
Swinging
away. Well,
away
I guess like yeah, yeah,
as a
yeah.
box.
I see you've been thinking. I see you've been thinking. That's amazing.
I'm working
Uh,
on it. I got some more.
you got some more. You got some more. Ready to go. No, that's good. That's good. We'll try them out in the episodes as we continue on, and I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun. So those of you who are doing this live, and I'll probably like post a YouTube video after all this, if anyone is interested. I'll have a little bit of background stuff going on, so it's just not our faces, and it's a little more interesting. Very last minute, I decided we should do this live, but Boxer Saint thankfully agreed. There is really only one reason we're doing this live right now. I'm pretty sure most of our episodes are going to be just audio only, but who knows if this is a success and people want more of it. I'm sure the 2 episodes or the once a month episode we can do live. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I'm always down to be live.
Yeah. So the big thing is, I guess should I probably explain what we're talking about here?
Yeah, that would be good. So everybody's it's kind of new. Catch people up.
It is. So just to I think my show the show originally started as a history podcast, right? In the sense it was Age of Empires, but it was very much looking at the history part of things, and it was going through the campaigns of AoE 1. Now, I brought this up, I think maybe around November, when Boxer Saint and I recorded, that maybe, we can actually try something history, but have it be a little more streamlined, maybe not so wide breadth is a word I might use, right? I think when I did the original version of the show, I was like, yes, I'm gonna do all of Egypt in 30 minutes. Okay, I'm gonna do the whole history of probably the longest civilization that ever existed on the earth in 30 minutes, right? So instead, we're gonna be looking probably a little more at AoE 2 stuff specifically, and specific instances, whether it's a civilization we're going over. Which I think it might be civilization, but the way we're gonna kind of frame it a little bit is the fact that I know Boxer's saying kind of came up with the idea for this week, but maybe there's particular interesting things, even more specific within that civilization that we're gonna take a look at, and we hope you enjoy. We hope you watch along with us. If there is any audio issues, audio balancing issues, just let us know. If you have any questions as we're talking in the chat, please let us know. So, Boxer Saint, I want you to give me an intro to what is the specific thing with. Oh, by the way, we're doing the Aztec civilization. What is the specific thing you wanted to talk about with the Aztec civilization?
So really, I want to build up to the Garland Wars. That's what piqued my interest when looking through just kind of their tech tree and their history. But the more that I've researched and tried to get around the Garland Wars, the more I realized how much of an architectural phenomenon the Aztec Empire was. So
Ooh,
probably
interesting.
architecture, and Garland Wars.
Nice. So those will be kind of the two themes. If I may start, I did some little bit of research, probably not as much as I would have liked for an episode like this. For those who don't know, I literally just completed our 3-year anniversary show half an hour ago. So I decided, we're doing this live now, so a lot of setup. But I want to talk about a little bit about the fact that when I looked up Garland Wars, it wasn't the word they used, or most commonly used in the history. I wonder if you found this as well. Did they use flowery wars or flower wars? Did you see this?
Yep. Flower Wars was what I saw most. And honestly, I struggled to even find a lot definite on Flower Wars.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know where I found the history of Garland Wars. But I went back to YouTube and some podcasts and even online, and I struggled to get anything in depth on Garland Wars. But I have read about it before, so
There it is. Yeah, and
I'd like to hear what you found.
obviously it's the upgrade, and that is based in the Age of Empires. Let me actually, since we are doing this live, I'm gonna go into this so we can see this. I believe I'm gonna go into skirmish here, and I'm just gonna check the tech tree here for the Aztec. because they have Garland Wars, which is a +4 infantry attack, and we'll learn about the history of it a little bit later. But I want to see if I can find this. Is usually in, where would this usually be if we think of the tech tree? I would say castle, right? That's usually where they'd be.
Yep.
So Garland Wars. I'm not seeing any flavor text here, interestingly enough. So I guess we're going to fill it in. I did find something interesting. Okay, this is a 1979 article that was written by a professor from the University of Louisville, and it's an interesting take, kind of essentially a lot of historians, when they talk about the Aztec, there's almost a mythologizing of like sacrifices, right? That's a very much a big focus that a lot of, when people talk about the Aztec civilization, that a lot of people talk about, right? And with regards to the Flowery War, this particular professor in this article, this academic article that I'm reading, and I'll read a little bit to you, kind of taking a stance that this wasn't necessarily for the sake of ritual sacrifice, but it might have been. And once again, this is what happens with historians. You have lots of people with different sides, different opinions, kind of talking about the same thing, have their same readers. But it might have been more of a training exercise for war, instead of as opposed to some grand ritual. So this is this particular professor's theory, and I'm going to read about it because I think it'll be a good jumping off point for us to talk about this topic, and that'll be our first part of our show, and then we'll be able to go in a little further on the Garland Wars after. So I hope you enjoy. I'll also throw in, I think just it'll be cool. I want to go on just a random map, shall we say here, but have the Aztec civilization, because it's a cool kind of background, especially once we get into architecture. I can show the buildings as this is going on. So I'll have that on the screen as well as we're going through this. Here it is. Okay, so I have this Frederick Hicks. A notion that has captured, all right, the imagination of many modern writers on Aztec Mexico is that the Aztec believed so fervently in the need to nourish their gods with the blood of human sacrifice, that they developed an institution called Flowery War. All right, so the implication here is this Garland War, these Flowery Wars, is this is an institution that essentially was set up so you could make blood sacrifice rituals to the gods, right? That is the notion that a lot of historians had, and I have not done enough research to know what the current modern notion of it is at this point. However, this is one opinion from 1979 from this professor, so take it as you will, but I think it's really good because it gives us nice detail about this. For the press, two states agreed to fight battles, so this is what the Flowery War is. It is held not to win, but simply to obtain, in proper military fashion, the necessary sacrificial victims. So this is the perceived notion. This is the perceived history of the Flowery Wars that this professor is writing about. This item appears in many standard works, all right, and then he notes a whole bunch of works, and seems to have become generally accepted element in the standard ethnographic vignette of the Aztec. So essentially he's saying this is something that seems to be established by a lot of historians, is that these Flowery Wars were things that were done for the sacrificial ritual purpose. Recently, once again, 1970s, has used it to support his theory of the Aztec cannibal empire. So a lot of people essentially it's become almost like this common thing, like, oh, this is just accepted as the common way to think about these Flowery Wars. Two states go to war for sacrifices. And they're using that to support new theories, right? And that's kind of how history works, right? It builds on the theories of previous historians, and they work through the evidence they have from archaeologists. And then, essentially, what this Frederick Hicks is saying, the early sources on the Aztec give little support to this notion. Ooh, you see that controversy? This is the fun part of history, is everyone kind of arguing about what it should be. There were indeed Flowery Wars in ancient Mexico, but they were waged primarily to obtain sacrificial were they waged to primarily obtain sacrificial victims? Were such victims normally even obtained through them? These questions have implications beyond the immediate concern with Aztec warfare and sacrifice. Are wars in state-level societies ever initiated for purely religious and ritual reasons? To be sure, the prominence of an official cult in many pre-industrial states, because I'm going to finish my long spiel in a second, so bear with me. playing through them. These questions have been, to be sure, the prominence of official cult in many pre-industrial states gives to most wars, whatever their motives or objectives, a religious aspect, and even in modern states, religion often serves to legitimize a protest begun for other reasons. Okay, so one of the things that he's arguing here, essentially, is that a lot of historians have taken these flowery wars and have said, these are sacrificial, these are for the purpose of sacrificial rituals once you gain prisoners from them, right? So that's the idea of this war. You go to war, you get sacrifices, and then you offer them up to the gods. And the first argument is one from this perspective is one that essentially it's not necessarily that the evidence backs it up, just enough people have thought this, so now it's kind of built into something. But two, which I think is the more interesting thing here, is essentially he's arguing that even if there is a ritual aspect to this, right, for two states to go to war, the ritual aspect could be an underpinning of them actually already wanting to have gone to war. You know what I mean? Like, these two states already want to fight each other, right? So this ritual aspect could be the excuse that both the states use to then engage in this battle. Is one thing that I think he's saying here in this first part. I'm not going to read through the whole article. We don't have time to go in depth through the whole article. But what do you think of that, Boxer saying?
I agree. I think, and that's what most attracted me to the Garland Wars or the Flower Wars. I think there are multiple layers of what's going on with the Flower Wars, whether intentional on the side of the Aztecs or not. And we might have jumped the gun and kind of just jumped right into the Flower War. But what the Flower Wars were, or the Garland Wars, they were small pitched battles that the Aztecs fought with their allies and their enemies. And they would use a smaller, it wasn't total war. It wasn't a full-fledged, we're coming out to kill you with everything we have and all of our military might.
Thank you for giving me this, because my article is not giving you the basis here. It's jumping into like more complex discussion or like people arguing about it. But yes, continue.
Yeah, so they'd show up with on a prearranged date with equal number of soldiers. And this is telling me that the Aztecs wouldn't use range weapons. They would only use melee weapons. I don't know if that is the same for everybody, but I assume it is. Kind of an agreed upon set of rules for how we're going to fight this fight. And people would die, and certainly with so much of a focus on blood sacrifice and appeasing the gods, I'm certain that was part of the underpinning here was to spill blood on all sides so that the gods can be appeased. But in addition, if you look at the Aztecs, I think there was a lot of propaganda going on one level. So if they've got equal number of soldiers and their soldiers are just better than everyone else's, then in a head-to-head fight, this is like a yearly or however often they fought it. This is a regular visualization to their enemies that, hey, man to man, we're better than you. So like you can come fight us if you want, but like here in a pitched battle, all things even, you're gonna lose, and we're bigger than you overall. So if you try to go total war, like that's not gonna work either. So I think there was a propaganda aspect that kept their enemies at bay and let them know their place in society. That hey, you're not ready to come take us on. And then in addition, if the Aztecs are larger than their enemies, just population wise, and they're both going to battle with the same number of troops, that's going to be a harder hit to a smaller empire than to the Aztecs. So the Aztecs might lose, I don't know, 1% of their fighting forces, but their enemies might be losing 5 or 10%, which that's a good trade, right? That's like gold units versus trash units. Like they trade very well. The Aztec soldiers do against everybody else. So those are the two main levels that I think from a purely, what's the word? From a purely logical or just purely political perspective, I think it's almost genius, right? It's a genius way. It's like I want to fight you and you want to fight me, but
let's not go all out war yet.
Neither one of us wants to like fully commit to this. Let's just see who's better. And then, just like a little bit of bragging rights and move on with our day.
I have two more comments on this. One, it's probably at this point we should say that neither of us have done enough research to fully understand everything. So
No,
we
this
are
is straight from Wikipedia.
we're
I'm
going.
Wikipedia.
Listen. This is, if you're looking for the most accurate historical podcast, that's not going to be it. We're going to do our best, and I think as these episodes evolve, I'll try to do more research to really get a full view. Like, I'm gonna be honest, like because I was a history major in my undergrad, but if I were to do this properly, like the preparation, definitely more than what I did today. I would say, like, I need to read at least 5, 6, 7 different sources, just to start getting a sense of what specifically we're talking about. I want to just underpin that in case, just so people know. If we say something wrong, it's gonna happen. But at least I'm hoping that you'll get kind of general sense of some of these things that we talk about, and there'll be an intrigue, and then you can decide what to do with it. Yeah, I think you're totally right that this is actually a cool way to think about it. I think, like, we've kind of mythologized, put into myth a little bit here, that like the one warrior battle, if that makes sense. I mean, you'll see in movies all the time where it's like, oh, there's all these like knights fighting, and then the one best knight, or like the king or the whatever, fights 101, right? But I think this is definitely an intriguing aspect that we can think about, where there are multiple purposes to a set thing, right? Is one of them, I think, what we're getting from this. But two, you want to be able to have conflict without that many deaths, right? In some ways, right? Like, if there are ways to establish, especially in these kind of societies, right, where custom and tradition prevail a lot. If there's a way to establish who's currently the dominant party, right, which kind of group is the dominant group, without completely having everyone go to war, that is the best thing possible. Is there anything else that stood out to you from these Flowery Wars?
Well, I mean, just wars are costly, right? And if you have a warrior society, that's, as great as that sounds, that only lasts so long. Because eventually, if you're constantly fighting wars, your death rate is higher than your birth rate. And I think a lot of historians believe that's what happened to the Spartans. They were the best warriors. They were amazing. But eventually, like, you fight too much and you just die off.
I will say, like, I think with ancient Greece, there's just, like, I think that's also been something that's so widely viewed upon as, like, this is the world, what's the word? This is the democracy, and all, like, it's kind of like the training ground for every type of political system, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like, when they fought Persia and fought off Persia was the more dominant, bigger empire that had way more of a threat, like way more influence than they ever had, right? This is like, when you look at Greece at that time, they're like, Sparta relatively was a very small place, right? So they were known as like the macho crew in Greece.
But even that was propaganda, right? We're talking about the Aztec propaganda.
Yeah.
Spartans were also spouting off some propaganda, and so a lot of what we know about both cultures come from secondhand reports, but also secondhand reports fed by their own propaganda. Like, yeah, we're the best there ever was.
And it transferred over thousands of years, or 1,000 years, right?
Yeah.
Like, and we're picking at straws, right? No, it's I think that's a really good point. I found it interesting that, like, the fact that I was able to find this article almost right away, where they're saying, like, we've went too far idolizing that this must have been, just purely, like, I don't know, because I think there's just such a fascination, especially historically, kind of looking at how history is written, with taking some of these cultures and putting them on a pedestal of things that are different, and, like, making them more crazy than it seems, right? But when you kind of explain, like, this could be a purpose of kind of knowing who's stronger or not stronger, right? That seems like I think one of the wildest things is, like, that seems like something a lot of cultures would do regardless, right, of whatever their own particular influences are. They'd want to know, okay, who's the strongest around, what's a way to avoid wars, and they might have a religious aspect related to it as well. So I think that's great.
It's a very unique very unique ritual and a very unique part of their society that maybe a European equivalent would be jousting or something, like some kind of martial combat sport that a very, very real danger, but also limited limited focus.
But I mean, I'd even go to that point. It's like most societies that haven't industrialized, right? Especially if they have less contact with the outside world, will have some form or another of sacrifice, whether it's human or animal, right? Or like they're through our history, a lot of societies have kind of thought of ways to appease the gods, right? To have something that is, I would say, kind of we, the weather's terrible. Okay, we have no crops and no food this year, so we must have done something wrong, right?
Yeah.
And you know, I think sometimes it's not necessarily the belief that's important to talk about, but it's the fact that essentially humans were saying we feel so helpless right now, and we feel like we have to do something, and hopefully this something will help us. Because the gods will change the weather next year, right? Or they'll
And it's
help
really
us
like a
in the world.
stress, almost a stress reliever. I think you can draw a parallel to like the Olympics during the Cold War, where Russia and the United States were always head to head, whether it's hockey or shot put or who knows whatever,
Yeah.
like whatever sports they're up against. It's really just a way to release that tension, and then also look and see who's got the better society, who's got the stronger citizens.
I think that's a great point. I think
And
sport, like I could talk about that fact that like sports are essentially a not a scapegoat, but a way of avoiding wars or being able to continue on a national pride or national identity without having to actually go into battle and fight, right?
yeah,
Which I think is definitely a great point.
it's probably healthy, but also telling about humans overall. We haven't really changed that much.
Well, we
I
haven't, but
want to get
I mean, but here's the thing, right? Like I think one big thing that's happened with humans in general is the sacrifice, the literal sacrifice has become symbolic, right? Has become something that is no longer like, we no longer have to sacrifice human for, to appease the gods, right? It's something that turns into symbolism. And then if you look, kind of objectively in a lot of like, major religions of the world, right? Where it's no longer an actual animal, right? It's usually some kind of transformed, oh, we're sacrificing in the sense, right? So I think
But
that's
the sacrifice and blood is such a visceral component
mm,
of like almost every culture and every religion. It's very fascinating that that's one thing, whether you're the Aztecs in the 13th, 14th century or say a Western Christian today, like that concept of sacrifice is a constant. That's interesting.
well,
That could be another episode.
no, I mean, yeah, but I would say like kind of to that point, I would argue that the it's because of the fact that, when it comes to sacrifice, I think what is the greatest thing humans value, right? A majority or every human being values life as the greatest thing, right? So if you are giving something in exchange, right? If you have a society that exchanges things, right? If you're believing that this thing that I'm doing, the sacrifice that I'm giving, is something that will be in exchange with the gods so that I can have life or I can have food or the weather is good or I win this war, then the belief is in this society or the humans, right? We are giving up something that is our ultimate value for that in return, right? Like we're
Mm.
giving a life because we deem it as such a high level, right? That by giving this up, well, we should get something really good in return, right? Because it's something that we value the most. So at least that's my prevailing theory here that I thought up the top of my head, but I think it sounds good. I'll let you think about
I
it.
don't dis-
That's half the thing
I
is
don't
history.
disagree with it.
Hmm?
I don't disagree with it offhand.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, this is the cool thing about history and philosophy and stuff. You can think about it, and see what you think of that theory. So yeah, I think this is some great points. I think we can now maybe go into a little bit about the architecture. So those who are following on with the stream, they're
I do
seeing.
have one question.
Oh, you do have one more question. Okay, hit me with it.
One more question, and then we can go off. What do you think about the way the developers put Garland Wars into Age of Empires? So Garland Wars
Hmm.
grants all Aztec infantry +4 attack. Do you think that matches with what the Garland Wars
This
was
is a
about,
great
or do you
question because
think
this is definitely how we wanted to tie this in. The whole point of
it's
tying.
all about Age of Empires?
Well, it should be history, but it should also be tied into Age of Empires. I think +4 attack. I would say, giving a little bit of health and giving a little bit of armor would have made sense too. Like survivability, because if these are training things, right, or if these are for the purpose of knowing which society is stronger, better, your warriors after this, right? At the end of the day, your warriors after this would have been better, right? You've gained experience, right? Even if you lost that, you might gain experience. So I think a plus attack makes sense because you're getting experience attack, but I think like a health, if for the sake of the history or my, and this is all arbitrary, but but for the sake of my thoughts on it, I think it'd be pretty cool if essentially they they added some health and some like survivability, because that's part of it too, right? The society that keeps most of their warriors would be better off. So, you know, like would it be crazy? Sorry, I was just thinking about this. Is if this was like an accurate representation, right? That like they do get like the winning. If you get Garland Wars, like would you like just all of a sudden you take, I don't know, five of random units from the opponent and they're just like sacrificed, like they just die, like that is the way to do it. Is that what you could do? I don't know, I'm just thinking out loud here, but I think from that perspective you can really start going on definitely some interesting ideas that both work from a game sense, right? Like what can we do in the game, but also like historically it would be very interesting.
Yeah, I like the +4 attack, and I think that makes sense, and it's a good bonus for the Aztecs. Makes them very strong infantry. So I think it would also have been interesting to see something like an extra 20 population room for them, so they can go up to 220, to kind of bring in that concept of they're kind of doing a battle of attrition with their
Mm.
opponent, and it constantly keeps them a little stronger than the soldiers around them, just in sheer numbers. Um,
Would it be
I don't know.
interesting if like, so this is like completely theoretical now, right? But like if you have more army population than your opponent, like as long as you maintain like a certain amount of army population, they have a bigger bonus, because then it would reflect like you're winning the. I don't know. I'm thinking outside the box here, but I think there's some cool things you could think about there.
Yeah, that would be interesting. That was my last question. I
Yeah,
just
no,
wanted to
good,
know.
good. I think we can get a little bit into the architecture now. You want to talk about? I'm currently in the second civ on the stream right now. So sorry, this I'm in the second. I'm in the feudal age. So really, I'm gonna be honest. Like people complain about Age of Empires 4 having like the 1, 2, 3, 4. However, for certain civs, using feudal age and castle age makes no sense whatsoever. I feel. Uh, yeah. I mean, mostly because of the name, not necessarily because the society didn't go through something similar at some point. But I think the name infers different things. Is my point. But
Yeah, I think you got to suspend reality a little bit to keep the game functioning.
no, yeah. If it was perfect, I mean, listen. If everything was historically accurate, then the game wouldn't be fun. That's the truth. Okay. Well, what were you gonna say then about the? What stood out to you about the architecture from what you read?
Okay. So architecture, I'd never heard this about the Aztecs on how advanced their architecture was. You can talk about obviously the temples they had. Some of them were carved out of ground, just out of the rock right there in the ground. Some of them were actually huge stones were carried for miles, and I think there's an estimate one of the stones in the temple would have required like 40,000 men to drag it from
Jeez.
from where it came from to get there. Just a crazy building. But they also had a functioning aqueduct, which you don't even see that in
the game.
quote Western
Oh,
world. Well, yeah, until the Romans. Um, there's probably others, but the Romans were the main ones that use aqueducts. So the not only do they have an aqueduct, but they had two lanes on the aqueduct, so they could dam up one and do repairs, and then let the water flow down the other side and keep water flowing to the city. Um,
so I just want to say, I want to throw this in here just because. Give me 2 seconds here, but I want to search this up
yeah,
just
okay.
just to be sure. The Aztec Empire itself was from 1345 to 1521, so this is significantly after the Roman period. However, we also have to remember that in the West, a lot of technologies were lost or used way less after the fall of the Roman Empire, right? So if you take a look at if we're taking Europe, right, which is usually the focus in Western history, after like the 400, right, really like after the Roman Empire fell, it took another like 500, 600, 700 years before societies kind of really started springing up again as a whole, instead of small little like village areas with maybe you'll pay a couple people to guard you, and you're just kind of you got one lord, but it's it's like 10 I'll use miles. 10, actually, we have an international audience. I'll use kilometers. We have 10 kilometers because I mean Canada uses kilometers and Stacy uses miles. But yeah, like 10 kilometers in a square squared. And that's it. You're just you're farming and you have a little society. So this kind of sprang up probably in a time where such technological innovation wasn't happening at the same rate around the world. I'm throwing this out there though. I think it's impressive that this was invented with, like, we forget about this, but with no interaction,
no contact. No contact with the Roman world at all.
with the rest of the world, right? Like 1492, right? We say so. That's kind of the fall, right? The fall is when there's that contact, and obviously that's the conquistadors and that whole history. But we're talking about what, 150 years. Which maybe in the grand scheme of civilizations might feel small. That's a long time, right? Like there are civilizations that can fall in 100 years, right? Not every civilization is going to last forever,
But they rose and fell within that time period, and implemented these aqueducts, implemented all these engineering marvels. That before this, they were, from what I've read, nomadic, right? They came from the southern United States. And then by the time they get to, I guess it's called the Mexico Valley here, like all the land's taken. They get thrown out on an island in the middle of this lake, and they just start building from there, dropping these temples, they sunk pylons to build on top of, to create more land masses for themselves. Yeah. So am I back on?
Yeah, you're here. I
Okay.
just want to quickly say here. I think this might kind of help ground us a little bit. I'm just going to give a brief history, just from our website, worldhistory.org or whatever, of kind of how the history went, and then I think we'll continue on to the architecture part, because I think this helps kind of really tie in everything we've been talking about. So, historical overview. Sometime around year 1100, right? The city states, or this is AD or BC. For the more common historical one, come now. Okay, we're not in ancient Greece territory. Okay, so about 1,000 years ago, the city states, or Altepetl, which were spread over central Mexico, began to compete with each other for local resources and regional dominance. Each state has its own ruler, who led a council of nobles, but these small urban centers surrounded by farmland soon sought to expand their wealth and influence, so that by 1400, several small empires had formed in the Valley of Mexico. So I think that's another important thing to keep in mind when we're talking about the Flowery Wars, or we're talking about the Aztec civilization as a whole, is they eventually become one, but really it is a multitude. It is a whole bunch of these smaller, like, little things. Small empires. Dominant amongst them were the Texcoco, capital of uh, Achulhua region and Azcapotzalco, capital of Tepanec. These two empires came face to face in 1428 with the Tepanec War. The sorry, I have a tough time. Some of these Azcapotzalco forces were defeated by an alliance of Texcoco, Tenochtitlan, the capital of Mexico, and several other smaller cities. Following the victory, Triple Alliance was formed. So this is probably, and then a campaign of territorial expansion began, where the spoils of war, usually former tributes from conquered, were shared between the three great cities. So there's three bigger cities that kind of combined together to win this, and then this is probably the closest approximation of what we think of when we think of the Aztec, is this bigger empire where these three cities had beaten one of these empires, and then they went on to spread their region, their territory in Mexico. So, yeah, that's just a bit of background, so you have an idea of kind of how this formed. So this is, if that was 1428, that really means the timeline for probably a lot of these technological innovations is super, super short, right? Like, you're talking less than 100 years to really, really have advances in this. So, continue on here.
Yeah. So they had these aqueducts built. I forget how many miles or kilometers they were, but pretty far. They would come down. They had them. One of their kings actually had a bathtub, essentially, or a little tub
Okay.
that the water would run into, and he could sit in his tub and bathe and just look out over the whole valley and see his little kingdom.
That's great.
He also had it set up to where it would sprinkle into his garden and slowly water his garden, and he had multiple little pools to gather the water and kind of limit the flow of water so he wouldn't overdo it. All the citizens, of course, would have fresh water at that point, and because of that, they were a relatively clean society. They had a lot of them bathed regularly. I think the king bathed at least twice a day.
Which is wild, because I'm going to tell you right now, in the rest of the world, that was not the case.
This is the same time period as the plague running through Western Europe, so not a very cleanly time over there.
That's great. No, sorry, I just love that you brought that up.
They had these long roads going in and out of the city because the city is on water. It was basically the Venice of the Americas. So all these places on water. And then the last thing that stood out to me, this is kind of a architectural innovation, but they had runners stationed at different places, and they could get news from one end of their kingdom to the other within, I think, 24 hours. And I believe it was like a 300-mile radius. News could travel from one side news could travel 300 miles in 24 hours, which is faster than the postal service today.
Well, but I mean, you're not wrong, right? Like I think the biggest factor when it comes to innovation and running any empire is logistics, right? Like it seems boring, but that is the reality, right? The ability to relay information, the ability to have access to all points of your empire continuously, right? Know what's happening and be able to respond to it. Is speed at which you transmit information and just logistically handling large amounts of people,
supply chain,
large amounts of people, large armies, right? Lots of things that have lots of variables, and something like this where you could essentially runner to runner, right? Like that's the way it works, right? You just have them stationed, and it's a brilliant, like, I think what we have to praise here is the ingenuity, right? The creativeness, right? Is we don't have these technologies, right? But can we make use of things, right? Like you can station one soldier, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Every kilometer, every couple kilometers, right? And they just live their life, and that is a very needed, not only needed, but very important role of them having to just run, like, you know, the couple kilometers to carry information throughout the day.
No horses here, by the way. Like at this point in time, horses are not native. They're not running wild. But when the Spanish showed up with horses, the Aztecs didn't know, and the Mesoamerican people in general didn't know what to make of them. I did not understand what this thing was.
I mean, and that's a really good point because like then you'll see just way later on, right? A lot of indigenous peoples to the Americas end up using horses in a very effective way once the technology is kind of discovered. But horses is a technology, right? In some ways, and I mean, as you see in the game, to relate to the game quickly, because I know we're talking about architecture, but as you see on my screen right now, there is no stable, right? So that is historically accurate to the Aztec people. So there you go. I like how they have Build Castle, but it's a what is it?
Temple.
It's a temple, right? It's a temple, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's really cool. That's really cool. Anything else that really stood out to you when it came to the innovations? So we have aqueducts. We had this kind of the faster than the postal service, as you joked. Temples. Yeah.
I think there were some
Mm-hmm.
there were some farming innovations they had. A lot of the land they carved out and built on the lake was farmland,
Mm-hmm.
so they had a good. It goes back to supply chain. They were able to feed their population, um, so that was interesting. They valued that and made sure that happened.
Did you find anything about how they built maybe the temples? I mean,
Um,
you talked a little bit about them.
yes, some of it was carved on the spot. Some of it was huge rocks pulled in. I think there's one story where like they had these prisoners and these slaves build the temple, and then when they finished, they used those slaves for sacrifice.
Mm.
That was kind of like a dubious story because you got to wonder if you got thousands and thousands of people that are building this for you, like how do you break that news? Like, okay, let's just all go to the top. Just don't worry about what we're gonna do when we get there. Like, I don't know. You had to have so many people to make it.
I
There's a
mean,
lot of conflicting
here's the
stories, and
thing,
I thought it
right?
was
Like
real.
if they've literally been working on it continuously, then they probably don't have the energy, nor were they probably well nourished at that point. I'd imagine
Yeah, they're just
you're not
done. They
feeding
don't
them.
care.
Yeah, you're not feeding
They're just
them.
like, do whatever you want.
I'm not that they do it every on. They might just no longer have the strength to be able to. Yeah. Um. Yeah, I think this is very fascinating. I here's the one thing like with kind of as we continue on because I know for our future AOE history episodes I know we're gonna want to get more information. Like I want to kind of go more in depth in some of these things, but I think it would have been cool had I had a full um understanding of the campaign specifically, like going into specifics of the campaign. I think upon a revisit, once we really, it takes a while to get a show to kind of really get the formula right. But upon a revisit of this, I think my next thing would be to literally go through the campaign, and then compare it to the actual history and see that accuracy. I think that would be really cool. I not necessarily play it, but maybe just go over what like the wiki and kind of work with it there. But yeah, I think this will be good for a first run around of this Boxer Saint. I I definitely think there are some intriguing things, and I'm hoping that in future episodes will be a little more. What is it? Our formula is going to kind of get more established. Maybe we'll be able to have longer episodes there. But I think this is good to kind of end it here. Some interesting facts, a little over the place. Maybe we need to organize it a little better. That's mostly on me as to the structure of it. But yeah, thank you, Boxer Saint, for researching this. I hope everyone who listened enjoyed this. We're gonna try to do this once a month. I don't know if it'll be live. We'll see. We'll figure that whether it's be live, live streamed or not. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, Boxer Saint, for being on, and we'll see you with I believe an AOE 4 episode in the next couple weeks, and then AOE 2 after that, and then AOE history. I think that's my order. I think that's what we're in. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for stopping by, and we'll see you next time. Peace.